Okay, let's unpack the absolute whirlwind that was the NBA playoff action on April 26th, 2025.
Quite a night.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You're here because you want the signal without the noise,
Yeah.
right? The crucial insights distilled down.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're serving up from a pretty stacked slate of games.
And what immediately jumps out, I think, is how these 5 contests have already started to, reshape the narrative of their series.
Totally.
We've got some surprising results, some clear shifts in momentum. It's going to be fascinating to watch unfold.
Couldn't agree more. So we're diving into Orlando Magic versus Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Bucks versus Indiana Pacers, Minnesota Timberwolves against the Lakers,
Big one there.
Cleveland Cavaliers versus Miami Heat, and OKC Thunder against the Memphis Grizzlies.
Right.
Our mission today, it's laser focused, pinpointing those pivotal moments, the strategic bits that swung these games, and, well, what it all means for the bigger playoff picture.
And if we sort of zoom out for a second,
Yeah.
these aren't just isolated scores.
No, exactly.
They're data points, really. They reveal key strengths, maybe some potential vulnerabilities, and definitely the tactical chess matches playing out between these teams.
Let's get right into it then, starting with that edge of your seat battle in the East.
Oh, yeah.
Orlando Magic just snatching a 95-93 victory over the Boston Celtics. Wow, what a tense finish.
What was truly telling about that Orlando win, I thought, was their composure under pressure. I mean, even though Boston still leads the series 2-1, right? That victory on the road, that's a massive confidence booster for Orlando. And what specifically stood out was how Orlando's defense adjusted, like in the final couple of minutes.
Right at the end.
They seemed to switch to a more aggressive pick-and-roll coverage, forcing Boston's guards into really tough contested shots.
Absolutely. The sources definitely highlight that late defensive intensity. It wasn't just about, effort.
No.
They seemed to anticipate Boston's go-to plays and just disrupted them really effectively.
Which, raises a key question for Boston now. How do they respond? How do they respond to that late-game defensive pressure?
Yeah.
They'll need to find alternative scaring options, surely, when their main actions are being stifled like that.
And a huge factor in Orlando's win, and you can't just skip over, this was their bench performance.
Oh, definitely. Crucial.
They provided significant scoring, real energy, letting the starters get crucial rest without losing momentum.
Yeah.
That depth, that could be a real headache for Boston as this series goes on.
It really underscores how important those role players can be in the playoffs, doesn't it?
It does.
Boston's got to find ways, maybe limit that bench production or, get more consistent contributions from their own reserves.
Right. Okay, switching gears. Another Eastern Conference showdown. The Milwaukee Bucks delivered a powerful statement. A 117-101 victory over the Indiana Pacers. This felt like Milwaukee just reasserting themselves.
No doubt. And the driving force behind that, clearly Giannis Antetokounmpo. The sources really emphasize his relentless attack on the basket, his scoring efficiency. When he's playing like that, with that level of intensity,
Get it out. Yeah.
he's incredibly difficult to stop. And what was particularly effective, I think, was his ability not just to score, but also draw multiple defenders.
Right, and kick it out.
Exactly. And then find open teammates for, easy looks.
He was just dominant. But it wasn't only an offensive explosion, was it? The Bucks' defense was also pretty impressive.
Very solid.
Really clamping down on Indiana's key offensive threats.
And this victory, Indiana still holds that 2-1 series lead, but it has undeniably shifted the momentum.
Big time.
Indiana looked so fluid offensively in those first 2 games, didn't they? But Milwaukee's increased defensive intensity clearly disrupted their rhythm.
Forced them into tougher shots.
Definitely.
So the ball is now in Indiana's court, so to speak. How do they adjust to that increased physicality, that defensive pressure from Milwaukee?
That's the million-dollar question for them.
They need to rediscover that offensive flow, find ways to get their key players open looks again.
Exactly. If they can't reestablish their offensive identity, this series could quickly slip away from them.
Definitely feels like a pivot point. Okay, let's head out west. The Minnesota Timberwolves continuing their strong play with a 116-104 win against the Los Angeles Lakers. This feels like Minnesota is really proving their mettle here.
Absolutely. The source material highlights a real synergy in their performance,
Right.
A collective effort, both ends of the floor.
Yeah.
It wasn't just relying on, individual brilliance. What stood out was their ability to maintain that defensive intensity for, well, most of the game.
It really wore down the Lakers.
It did.
And Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, both delivered really impactful performances, scoring, contributing defensively.
That kind of two-way production from your star players, that's essential in the playoffs. Yeah. Absolutely essential.
And for the Lakers, what's got to be concerning is their inability to sustain their energy, their execution, really throughout the whole game.
Especially that second half.
Yeah, they seemed to struggle with Minnesota's pace, their physicality as the game wore on. Just couldn't keep up.
Seemed that way.
Now, down 2-1 in the series, the pressure's squarely on the Lakers, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
They need to find answers and find them quickly to counter Minnesota's strengths and somehow regain control of this matchup.
And this raises a critical question, I think, about the Lakers' strategic flexibility. Can they adapt their game plan? Can they better match up with Minnesota's energy, their defensive pressure, or will they just continue to struggle with the Timberwolves' intensity? It's tough.
It really is. Okay, staying out west for a moment. We saw a very decisive victory from the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Decisive is the word.
Dominating the Miami Heat, 124-87. That's a statement win if I've ever seen one.
Indeed. The sources point to just a comprehensive performance from Cleveland, excelling on offense, defense.
They controlled it.
Start to finish. What was particularly effective was their ball movement on offense, wasn't it? Consistently finding open shooters, creating easy scoring opportunities.
And Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland.
Yeah.
They were just in sync, leading the scoring, the playmaking.
Yeah.
When those two are clicking like that, the Cavaliers' offense becomes incredibly difficult to defend.
And for Miami, well, their defense just couldn't contain Cleveland's attack. Simple as that.
Nope.
Struggled to generate stops, allowed Cleveland to build that big lead, and just maintain it the whole game.
Now, leading the series 3-0, Cleveland is right on the verge of a sweep.
Yeah.
Making Miami's chances of advancing incredibly slim. They need a historic comeback at this point, wouldn't they?
Miraculous, really. And if we look at the bigger picture here, this dominant performance from Cleveland, it sends a clear message to the other contenders in the East.
For sure.
They are playing with a confidence, a cohesion that could make them a serious threat moving forward.
Definitely one to watch. Okay, finally, we saw the Oklahoma City Thunder complete the series sweep against the Memphis Grizzlies.
We wrapped it up.
Winning that final game 117-115. So while the series result itself wasn't maybe a huge surprise, that last game was a real nail-biter.
It was close. And what continues to impress game after game is the consistent excellence of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
SGA.
The sources highlight his ability to just take over in crucial moments, driving the offense, making key plays down the stretch. He's really establishing himself,
as a premier player.
Absolutely, premier player in this league. And what was notable in this final game was his ability to draw fouls, get to the line, and convert those free throws in really tight situations.
Ice cold. But Memphis, you got to say, they definitely showed a lot of fight.
They did.
Especially in this final game, pushing OKC right to the very end. You have to give them credit for their resilience, especially being shorthanded.
Absolutely. No quit in them. But this clean sweep for Oklahoma City, it just solidifies their position, doesn't it, as a real force in the Western Conference.
Seems that way.
They've shown they can close out a series efficiently, which is a valuable trait heading into the next round.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into yesterday's playoff action, it's pretty clear that these games have laid the groundwork for an incredibly exciting continuation of the postseason.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen momentum shifts, dominant performances, potential upsets brewing, like all across the league.
And what's fascinating now is to consider how these outcomes will influence the strategic approaches of the remaining teams. Coaches will be dissecting these games, looking for weaknesses to exploit, strengths to build on, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So to quickly bring it all together for you listening, Orlando's gritty win injects real life into their series against Boston.
Big time.
Milwaukee's dominant performance shifts the momentum back against Indiana. Minnesota has put the Lakers in a tough 2-1 hole. Cleveland's commanding victory has them on the cusp of sweeping Miami.
Almost done there.
And Oklahoma City completed a very confident sweep of Memphis. Quite a recap.
It is. And maybe this raises a final thought for you to chew on. Looking back at these 5 games, which result surprised you the most? And maybe more importantly, which team's shift in momentum do you believe will have the most significant impact on the next playoff rounds?
Good question.
Yeah, and maybe consider the strategic pivots the losing teams might be forced to make now. Lots to think about.